So,
Okay.
hello everyone. Welcome to this week's installment of ClueCon Weekly. This week we have Ben Weeks from Agora, senior architect at Agora. Thank you for joining us, Ben.
Thanks, Luca. Hi, everyone.
Would you like to give us a quick introduction about yourself and what you've been doing in the past before joining Agora?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in voice and video telephony since sort of early 2000s when people were still using Flash player on the internet. When
Wow.
the echo problems back then, before iPhones had cameras. It kind of started with the fact that mobile phones in Europe, not in America, introduced a very basic video calling, which nobody ever used. But before we realized no one was ever going to use it, we'd built some services with TV companies, things like speed dating and watching the horses and things like that. Never really took off. So we'd built some sort of multimedia conferencing services. And then we looked for ways to open those up to people on the web. Flash was the way at the time, had its echo problems and delay being sort of TCP. And we were kind of on top of that. So getting the UDP side of Flash and then building gateways and selling them to banks to allow their customers to talk to their staff through their online banking. Then WebRTC came along in sort of 2010 and 11, and we were all over that, going out to the US. My company Requestec, doing on stage demos with other companies, sort of little competitions, which was great fun. And we got picked up by Blackboard, sort of largest education company in the world. We were acquired by them in 2014. I was chief architect there for longer than was anticipated. Quite good. Enjoyed working there. Learned quite a lot. It's great to see the technology being rolled out at scale in a single vertical and learning quite a lot. And then stepped out of it for a little bit. And then along came the pandemic and everyone was back into video calling again. And I was fortunate to have the opportunity at Agora, which is a great place. I can really focus on the bit that I enjoy, which is the technology and the science, rather than when you're running a company there's a lot more to think about and often you don't really get to do the fun stuff. But I get to have a great mix of experimenting, coding, and talking to other like-minded people and customers, building some quite cool projects, many of which I can't talk about.
Yeah, that's very often the problem with people in our position. I'm an architect. I'm lead architect at SignalWire too, and sometimes you're building something really cool which you can't mention because either it's
Yeah.
for someone who can't be mentioned or the project itself can't. But still, no, we're always working with something cool. And yeah, so I think you've been. Let's start from the closest in time thing because it's really interesting to me. You've been speaking at Cranky Geek about GPU and CPU levels in the browser, which to me is
Yeah.
completely new. I'll be honest, I didn't know you could do that. So let's start from
Well, you
there because
can't.
it's super interesting.
Yeah. So in theory, you can't. It by design, you can't get access to any of the information about the CPU and the GPU. It's for privacy reasons. It's been a problem. It's been there for a long time. But as I've been getting into this more so sort of earlier this year, basically looking at ways to infer that the problems are starting to occur. And there's sort of three main areas that you can do this. And it depends whether the device is using CPU, GPU, and the operating system. But I'll quickly walk you through the three ways. In JavaScript, you can ask for a callback to a function, and you might say 500 milliseconds. Now, in a real-time system, when you're scheduling, it's never going to be exactly 500, but it's near enough, within a few percent. If a device is starting to run out of CPU resources, that callback time will start to increase.
I see.
That's one way. Another way is actually when you're accessing all of the WebRTC internal statistics, it has to go through certain things internally in the code. And when it's using GPU to do the decoding, you'll find that quite quickly the time it takes to get back the stats, things like the decode, number of packets, etc., again, suddenly starts to go up exponentially. So there's a level that you can find that the GPU is starting to suffer as well. And finally, another nice little way is that, and I try and link everything to like ears and eyes. So in the real world, you'll notice when your browser's starting to struggle, when perhaps the frame rate isn't nice and smooth, or you get a little jerk,
right.
and then it catches up. You can actually detect all that happening in the browser before the human eye does. I call it render rate volatility, and you can, by keeping a rolling list of samples as to what the current frame rendering rate is, which is an internal statistic, you can start to see if it's jumping around a bit, if there's volatility. So if you're sampling every 500 milliseconds, twice a second, and you find that the frame rate's going 20, 24, 28, 24, 20, there's like a 10% volatility there, which is too high. That's showing that, and that's a really good one for things like iPads, where they become CPU bound, and that's where they start to creak first. So keeping an eye on those three areas, you can tell when your browser's starting to run out of CPU before the user will. And as long as you ramp up the number of streams that you're displaying, and you're prepared to quickly drop down the resolution of the streams that you're displaying, the quality of them, and then even display fewer streams on devices which can't support loads of streams, you can build up to some really large grids. I was demoing 8x8 64 on my Mac, no problem at all, but it was able to, on other devices which couldn't handle that, gracefully display fewer. And then it's a case of how do you prioritize which streams to display. That's typically done using active speaker. So you've got a list of the last 6-10 speakers or whatever, and you'll show the people who've spoken most recently as your people that are on screen at the moment.
Yeah,
That's
there's
it in a nutshell.
many tricks. I have to say that's super interesting. So there's ways to infer it. I think the one that interests me the most is probably the frame rate detection fluctuations. Like if it's going down too much, etc. It's probably going to be more. How do I say it? It's closer to what the user is experiencing. If you get what I mean, like if the frame rate is going down, the user is definitely noticing. Well, the other detection mechanisms will be something that are more technical, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. And often if I'm trying to detect that this doesn't work so well in WebRTC, but in the old days, if I'm trying to detect if there's any audio issues, I'd be looking for my jitter buffer running out, because when your jitter buffer is running out, you're going to be getting crackles or silence injected into the noise. So it's good to look as close as possible to the thing which the human is connected to try and detect quality issues starting to creep in.
That's super interesting. I'm thinking, have you released any code samples? Is there anything people can go take a look?
Yeah.
Well, they can go see your presentation at Cranky Geek, I suppose. It's even easier.
And there's a completely open source. Agora provides loads of open source demos, and there's an open source demo using the exact thing that I was demoing at Cranky Geek, and we can share that URL here if you want, or people can get in touch and I can share that with them.
Well, maybe we can put that in the video description when we put the video on YouTube, so everybody has it. Cool. So, well, you mentioned open source. ClueCon Weekly tries to be an open source podcast at heart. Have you been involved in any particular open source projects? What's your favorite? And what can you say about the open source world if you've had any exposure to
it? The sort of biggest project that jumped to mind there was a project called Opal VoIP, which specialized in H323 and SIP. And we used to use that a lot back in Requestec for building our VoIP gateways. And, we would contribute back to that as much as we'd use it as well. So that was a big one. That's not so much in use now, really. Other projects have sort of superseded that. But yeah, most of the things that I'm doing at Agora are open source. Building stuff around the Agora SDKs, and there's quite a few of those. Interestingly, we had a hackathon last week. One of the top projects was building a proctoring, which is the ability to monitor students taking exams at home, where you might have one device, their mobile, providing a camera from one angle, while they're taking the exam on this computer. And if they start to do anything out of the ordinary, like switching tabs, or there are voices in the background, or they resize their browser, or a second face appears in their video stream, all of these things will notify the proctor or the invigilator. That was quite a cool one. Another really interesting one I liked was the Metaverse. So the ability, Metaverse is taking off, but when you're in the Metaverse, the ability to hear other people as you get close to them, sort of geographically in that world. Because I was trying to get my head around where a typical video calling technology fits in with the Metaverse. Now, obviously, you've got screens within the Metaverse where you might have someone pop up, but that's a 2D screen. All the 3D stuff is going to be rendered locally so that it's quick to look around. You wouldn't turn your head and receive the video of what it looks like to the left of you over the internet. That's going to give you way too much of a delay and a sickness. So it doesn't really fit, but the voice does. So when I'm talking to other people in the Metaverse, that will be transmitted across the internet, much like it is with voice over IP, whether it's WebRTC or SIP, etc. So there's going to be a massive amounts of opportunities for your type of world and what I'm used to for providing the voice connectivity and spatial audio and all the stuff that goes in that area.
That sounds very interesting. Yeah, what's your take on the metaverse? Is it really going to take off? I'm still I'll so I try not to be biased, so I'll give you my opinion after I hear yours.
Well, sadly, I think we're all headed into personal spaces where we connect, through technology. I say sadly because I like interacting with humans in the reality. In the physical world, like in the same space in a room, and that's probably gives you the most amount of pleasure on a night out if you actually go and be in the same room with people. But obviously there's advantages in terms of it's safer, it's healthier, it's faster, there's more variety if you're going to connect virtually. There's lots of things to sort of outweigh that. And when I look at how my kids are playing, they're quite old now. They're 12 and 14. They've got the Oculus. They're on their phones. There isn't much interest in taking the dog for a walk or going horse riding, sailing, any of the stuff that us as kids kind of quite enjoyed doing. That doesn't seem to be quite an effort to get them to enjoy that type of thing now, perhaps. Anyway, that's probably my failure. Parent.
No, I mean, that's you're probably right, and I think what you're referring to is true. The metaverse is probably going to take off more in the entertainment industry. What I feel like I'm not so sure about is how pervasive metaverse should be in the workplace. SignalWire is a fully remote company. Everybody works from their home all the time. We don't really we have an office, but there's 3 people in there out of 80. And but I feel like the right amount of interaction is being on a video call like the one we're on now. Work is a few nice tricks. You can see rooms and see who's in each room, etc. But then I don't feel like I really want to walk through a virtual corridor to go knock on a virtual door to ask our senior JavaScript developer if it's done with the change I requested. And that's my feeling, right? I can just write him a message like, "Hey, are you done? Or should we push this to tomorrow?"
Yeah. No, for sure. I've heard people talking about meeting in a metaverse, giving you more of a sense of being together than on a video call like this, a 2D video call. But yeah, I'm not so sure.
Am I too old? That's a question we start asking ourselves at some point, right? You see the 20-something JavaScript wizards down in front end that do all this kind of stuff like it's natural. And so I am from the people who had to learn how to use email. I'm old enough.
Yeah. One thing I like the idea of those, like you can get these really good 3D photographs, because your mood changes, doesn't it, if you're sat on a beach compared to in a grey same office. I imagine it'd be quite therapeutic to to put on the headset and take some quite good breaks when you're at work or in an office, and you just want to have a change of scene or a different experience to trick your brain into thinking you're somewhere else.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. So, anything else cool you've been working on? You mentioned a few other things when we were discussing the interview, so I'm curious.
Yeah, well,
Things
I
you can
think
talk about, of course.
yeah, two of the big things at Agora. One is they sort of run their own overlay network globally. What that means is that in every ISP, tier 2 ISP, they have servers which connect the different ISPs. So if I want to send a packet from here to India, it goes straight into my BT ISP, which I'm providing, where Agora will have the ability to send it over any path it wants from here to India, rather than just using BT's inter ISP links, which often go much longer distances due to least cost routing and stuff like that. In fact, you can put an Agora WebRTC call and an App RTC one side by side, have a call with someone in India, and it's at least a second quicker on Agora. I had to do that and run them side by side. I mean, that's how, often experts in this area don't realize. Well, I didn't until you run it. So there's ways of using the public internet for voice over IP, video over IP, which make it way better. So that's something that I'd like to sort of bring to your audience's attention. And then using the sort of architecture that they have, which isn't any single SFU or MCU, everything is routed over the shortest sort of distance, because it's like a multi SFU architecture. It can scale any individual session up to over 1 million participants, which is also quite impressive and phenomenal as a network. And that works in China, all across the world. So it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, we use a similar concept as an overlay network internally. It's not as sophisticated yet, but we're getting there. I think the future of our kind of platforms is probably going to be even closer to, I don't know, actual private network-ish. Like everybody's trying to get away from the public internet. We all know what the internet is for. I won't say it because we're on a PG-12 podcast, but we all know what the internet is for, and it feels like you're not the first person I hear this from. We do this. Everybody seems to be building their own sort of overlays, and I feel like 5G is actually going to help a lot because of the edge computing, the powerful backhauls that are not tied to general internet. And we've been experimenting with that a lot. And it feels like we're essentially, getting away from public internet. Guys, it's all yours. You can use it for what you all know we use it for anyways.
Yeah. So yeah, learning about networks good. And yeah, scalability. Having massive sessions is good architecture as well.
So just curious, those are all WebRTC based, right?
Agora has SDKs for native as well. So WebRTC in a web browser is one part of it, but yeah, iOS, Android, Linux, even Windows, Mac, SDKs for all platforms.
Another thing I've heard and read about is that there's a couple platforms that are actually using just pushing raw packets over a data connection of sorts, which is not strictly WebRTC, which has been very interesting. I mean, WebRTC is a lot of things, but the actual not using the media stream from WebRTC for the inbound media. Of course, you have to use it for the outbound for your own camera because there's no other API. But the inbound streaming is actually raw RTP in the end.
Yeah, no, you're right. I don't know if you're trying to avoid names, but I think Zoom works like that. For example,
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're referring to. But
it doesn't make.
We don't avoid names. It just
I don't understand why. It's probably just easier. It fits in with their current architecture. They don't want to switch between the two. But I think that does lead to issues, certainly quality issues. You miss out on a lot of the stuff in WebRTC to optimize the downlink, such as NAC re-requesting packets quickly, such that you can have quite a high amount of packet loss and it's still smooth. That's the sort of testing I'm doing quite a lot, introducing packet loss and jitter, and looking to see how different platforms handle that, different codecs and FEC and all the rest of it.
Yeah, it does feel. I mean, it certainly works for them because let's be honest, they brought video to the masses, and that has to be said. But it feels like you're exactly right. They're doing away with so much that's standard, and as being standard means there's a lot of people working on it, so they fix problems for you. You end up in your own ivory tower where if something is not working, you're the only one that can fix it.
Well, yeah, and it's what is frustrating. It has been the same way for as long as I can remember, which is since the beginning, that browsers are still breaking the basic experience. I don't know how up to date you are on things like iOS 15.
Oh, I
That
am too
crashes
deep.
with
I'm too deep
H.264.
in it because of customers.
I know, but I mean, it's just silly, isn't it? I mean, it's been going on for years and years and years. This type of thing of breaking one thing, fixing something, breaking another. Not really caring too much. It's yeah.
Last year with our SDK, with our video SDK, at the start, I was helping out a large customer with the project, and everything was ready, and they had to delay launching their project because iOS 14.6 points, well, one middling version of iOS Safari will just randomly run out of memory and crash using WebRTC, and that was prevalent enough for a while that we just had to wait. One day they release 14.7 or whatever is the following version, and it goes away. We filed requests, we filed bug. Nothing ever came out of it, but they did fix it. So it's just not very well communicated, probably.
Yeah. I mean, where possible, it's good to be testing with beta. Automated testing on beta releases of browsers is definitely recommended to try and alert the company that there are problems, but sometimes that doesn't stop them releasing it. It doesn't seem to be like a priority sometimes. I think Apple were
Yeah,
aware of these problems before they pushed it into alpha, or not alpha, into release mode.
cool. So, well, that's super interesting. I mean, the overlay networks are going to be, in one way or another, are going to be the future of video, because I also think, and I don't have statistics to back this up, but I think I'm gonna go look for some, that traffic on the internet has increased in general as a result of so many video calls being placed.
Yeah, I think it must have done. I don't
Yeah,
know how you find that out in terms of the global through,
well,
but there's that Thousand Eyes report, which is really good. Don't know if you've seen that. It finds all the weaknesses in the internet.
oh, really? Cool.
Yeah,
That's
they test latency between lots of different places over lots of
mhm,
different carriers between different data centers, and there's some quite cool anomalies and things that you can see in there.
super. Yeah. Well, I think I'm gonna. So it's called Thousand Ice.
Thousand Eyes, like eyeballs.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. Well, let's go take a look. And what else? Well, I think it's great to meet someone. Well, as you know, obligatory plug SignalWire as a bridge towards Agora. So you can use Agora you can keep using your Agora video rooms, but you can use SignalWire to place call into an Agora video room in case you need it. We actually have quite a few customers using that a lot. One in particular is doing a lot of traffic over that. Yeah,
Well,
and
that's cool. I didn't know
so
that you had an integration actually with Agora.
it happened
Can people?
sometime last year as part of our first wave integrations.
Yeah. Does that mean people could dial in then from PSTN into the same room? Is
Correct.
that
Yes.
how it with your system?
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. No, I often get asked about features like that, and there's Turbo Bridge, which I know about, an integration such as that, but I didn't realize that you guys
Well,
had integrated as
even
well. So
better. So people go look it up and see if you like it, and I can help you with it, and probably Ben can point you to someone who can help too.
yeah,
Cool. So, well, Ben, thank you for joining us today. It was a great chat. We went through a lot of interesting things. That CPU detection in the browser is what I'm going to do over Thanksgiving, because for the audience, me and Ben, neither of us is from the US, so we have 2 days off. So we get to spend time on either catching up or doing cool stuff.
Yeah. Well, get in touch after this, and I'll send you a link, and you can have a play with some of my
Awesome.
stuff.
I'll get started right away. Well, again, Ben Weeks, Senior Architect at Agora. Thank you for joining us today. And for everybody else, I see you next week. Goodbye.
Thank you.